West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte
It was my experience that Mr. Trump inflated his total assets when it served his purposes and deflated his assets to reduce his real estate taxes.
That may be where it all started. Testimony from Michael Cohen. The Trump Org Probe continues. He is here with us live, the author of the book Disloyal and host of the Mea Culpa podcast. Thanks for coming back, Michael.
You're welcome. Good to see you, Ari.
Good to have you. You look at these new reports, they confirm a lot of what you have said. They confirm some of what we've been reporting here, as I mentioned. What does it mean to you, based on your knowledge of the company, that according to some sources, these indictments are coming soon, but they would begin potentially with these issues around the CFO Weisselberg and maybe indicting the company or part of it?
So I'm not so sure that the indictments don't start as early as tomorrow or Wednesday. I mean, the DA has been, very busy putting this case together. They have millions of documents. I've said this on your show before. Alan Weisselberg is not the key to this indictment. It's not Weisselberg, it's not Calamari, it's all of them or none of them. The documentary evidence is what the DA has and what they're going to be going on. You know that as well as anybody. Now, one of the things about Weisselberg, they claim, is that he's not cooperating. He's actually the opposite. He's refusing to cooperate. Well, that's okay, because right now they're in the investigation stage, and it's always easy to be tough when you're in the investigation stage. Once those indictments come in, it's a total different game. Now, what's on the line is your freedom. And based upon the allegations that are being brought against Weisselberg, against Calamari, against the Trump Organization and others, I mean, you're looking at potentially 10 years. And rest assured, the game is not stacked in your favor. And the lawyers will turn around, especially that they're being paid by Trump right now, that, stay the course, like what was told of me, stay the course, stay on message, do what you need to do, right? Don't worry, Donald is there for you. He loves you. He's going to protect you. He'll never let anything bad happen until, of course, he forgets Alan who? Matt who? Michael Cohen who? That's exactly what's going to end up happening. And then he's going to be faced with a choice.
You're making sound points. Of course, you've lived it. I have very, very brief sound here, though, that some might have forgotten, which is so relevant because Mr. Weisselberg provided some sort of information in the investigation that touched on, as we've reported, payments that he, you, and Donald Trump arranged. This was how Donald Trump talked about that incident and Mr. Weisselberg's role. Take a listen.
100% he didn't. Okay. 100%. He's a wonderful guy. It was a very limited little period of time.
That was a period of time where, again, not to belabor the point, but as you just accurately said, Donald Trump did not stand by you. He did, though, there publicly stand by Mr. Weisselberg when it was convenient for both of them. If there is a charge, an indictment against Weisselberg, what's going to happen in your view? And do you think Mr. Weisselberg could ever change his mind?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's the distinction between the investigation and the indictment. And it's not just the indictment of Allen. It's the indictment of his sons, potential indictment of his sons as well. Both of them had involvement with the Trump organization, Barry as an employee and Jack as part of Ladder Capital. But it's not just Weisselberg. You have Calamari, who's basically being looked at for the exact same allegations that are being brought against Weisselberg.
Catching people up, you're talking about an former bodyguard and executive who also is, according to the Wall Street Journal, under the same scrutiny.
That's exactly correct when it comes to having the rent-free apartments, having the vehicles, and so on, and being involved in other aspects of the Trump organization, which the DA is seriously looking at. So on top of that, let's not forget Jeff McConney, who's the comptroller, the assistant comptroller, works specifically for Weisselberg. He's already been before the grand jury.
Yep.
So you take his testimony, you take the testimony of Jen Weisselberg, of myself, of Stephanie Winston Wolkoff, of a half a dozen other people. You couple that with the documentary evidence. Rest assured, Allen does not want to spend his golden years with his children in prison. That I can tell you for certain.
Sure. Well,
prison is not a fun
Michael,
place.
I'm jumping in again because I want to get you on another part of your experience and expertise that most people just don't have, which is why it's interesting to listen to you, whether people agree with you or not. You were a Trump lawyer for a long time. And that's a certain kind of job for a certain kind of client. I reported out and quoted accurately some of what the Trump lawyers are saying today. Can you give us any insight into what their public strategy is, what they might be doing with the DA, and how much of it is being quarterbacked or coached by Donald Trump himself? Because they're opening on a very Bill Barr-ish style, which is, before we get the news or the indictments, they already have their version of why it's not a big deal, that can or cannot work. Any expertise you can bring us on that as a former Trump lawyer?
Sure. So I understand that whether it's Fischetti or Alan Futerfuss who went in to speak to the DA, none of it, Hari, rest assured, none of it is the decision making by the lawyers. It's all being orchestrated by Donald, and everybody runs around him trying to do what it is that he wants to be done in order to appease the king. And what's going to ultimately happen, he has no idea what he's facing.
Let me press you. There are folks who looked at the Mueller probe and at the beginning thought, well, Bob Mueller knows what he's doing. Donald Trump doesn't know this game. A lot of people got indicted. I wouldn't call it a success for MAGA land, but he did save his own skin, as you know. What do you say to the argument or view that Donald Trump's back at it, and with no disrespect to law school, he didn't go there, but he seems to know his way around a mix of lying and lawyering?
Yeah, well, Donald Trump's big out is the fact that there are no emails or there are no text messages because he has no email address and he doesn't text message. However, all of the documentation refers back to the boss or to him by name and so on. And yes, it's not a slam dunk since you don't have the emails from his email address since he doesn't have it. But if everything and everybody all acknowledge the same thing, that everything was done at the direction of and for the benefit of Donald J. Trump, including when it comes to the taxes, where I believe that he'll look to throw the accountant and the accounting firm under the bus, right? They all are going to then have to come out and defend themselves, leaving Trump all by himself. And eventually, this is what's going to happen as a direct result of these indictments that are going to be coming out.
It is Tuesday, the 29th of June of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. Well, need to give you a little bit of a heads up here. I had not a terribly good night last night. I seem to have worn out my wrist yesterday, doing a lot of work around the property to stay ahead of the really bad heat that we have here in the Northwest, the Pacific Northwest. So I'm going to try to soldier through. It's quite painful. Let's just put it that way. Several years ago, I had contracted cellulitis. And ever since then, the nerves in my right wrist have just been really bad. This is years ago, 7 years ago, and it's still giving me problems. I guess it's like carpal tunnel or something. But it's all inflamed. It's hot. I've had it packed in ice. I could not sleep last night. It was so painful. And I'm had a bit of a problem this morning just trying to get things together. It's really hard when you need both hands. Now, I'm ambidextrous, so I can do a lot with my offhand. And I do, but a lot of things you need both hands to be able to, well, copy and paste, move files around on a computer screen, and just the little amount of pressure on my fingers to do that. It's so painful, it brings tears to my eyes. Ooh, boy. And I've had other pain before, and this is just, well, it's uncomfortable. It's in the way. So there's that. I'll try to marshal through. It may be that we hurry through a few of the news reads and we have elongated clips. I apologize for that, but we might have to do that because it's hard to concentrate. But I will attempt to give you a show because the show always must go on. Well, it was hotter yesterday in Portland than the day before. Portland registered I take that back. Salem, Oregon, the state capital, registered 117. Portland was up around 114. Both towns much hotter than they were the day before. In Rogue River here, we had 117-degree weather right here at the mothership. And yesterday we got up to 114. So we were still pretty damn hot. Now, in Salem, Oregon, the Marion County sheriffs take it upon themselves really to be pretty much the Gestapo. They always have been and always will. And I don't know why, but yesterday they were destroying water jugs and cooling stations because it was set up for the homeless. And Marion County has a zero-tolerance policy for the homeless. If you give a homeless person a sandwich, you've broken the law. If you give them $1, you've broken the law. If you buy them a McDonald's, you have broken the law. So yesterday, in heat that has never been registered in Salem, Oregon, ever before in recorded history, the cops decided to destroy water. They dumped them all out and dismantled the cooling stations. So I guess the cruelty is the point, isn't it? Defund the police? Well, how about defunding the part that does that? When we say defund the police, I think what they mean is stop the stupid practices. What's up with that? Well, I guess they don't like the unhoused. It must be the unhoused fault for being unhoused. So destroy their water in an epic heat wave and the cooling stations because, well, cops gotta be cops, indeed. What else? The search continues in Surfside. I believe that it's not to look for survivors at this point. We would have heard some sort of signal, but unfortunately, no. 150 continue to be missing, which I guess means they're dead. And that is a sad story in and of itself. Do we blame infrastructure? Well, I don't know. The idea of deferring maintenance, this is the result. You defer maintenance and you may pay more. And people lose their lives. Now, the part of the complex that is still standing, apparently folks are hesitant to move out, to evacuate. I don't know. If it was me, I would think that the same structural lack of integrity that resulted in the other part of the complex pancaking in a collapse might be true for the tower that's standing. If steel was impregnated, or if the concrete where the steel was impregnated by salt water or air, that's how the corrosion and the decay takes down a building. I don't see how a complex that was built with the same materials at the same time and the part of the structure that is still standing, lucky to be standing, will remain standing. Now, I suppose structural engineers looked at it and said, well, it's okay, I guess. But if I were those occupants of those condos in that part of the complex, I would be going somewhere else. So, I don't know. It's Florida, and they do things a lot different in Florida, obviously. And look what Ron DeSantis did. He was too enthralled with doing a maggot rally than in declaring a state of emergency. He finally did. But he was proverbially brought to the conclusion kicking and screaming. Well, proverbially. And but he finally did. And I think because, well, somebody told him, you better. I know that Joe and others had encouraged him, but he doesn't listen to those people. No, not at all. Because he's a Republican. He doesn't listen to liberals because we are the other. And we will always be the other. I know. Okay, well, this wrist is rather bothersome and it does intrude. So why don't we go through what we have curated for you today as we start off in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Well, Trump is in big trouble because the crimes were orchestrated by Donald. And we know that. So now it's going to be proved in court. On the rest of the menu, the shooter who rammed a stolen truck into a house and then killed 2 black bystanders in Massachusetts was a white supremacist. And he left a bunch of notes, too. Included in the bipartisan infrastructure deal is a plan to eliminate the country's remaining lead pipes, because we know what lead does. And California banned state-funded travel to Florida and 4 other states. And we'll get into reasons why. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where a growing number of crypto asset firms are abandoning attempts to register with Britain's financial regulator as scrutiny of the sector intensifies. And Greek police recovered paintings by Pablo, Picasso, and Piet Mondrian, both stolen from Greece's National Gallery in 2012. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is our chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of the chat room link, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the left there is our Patreon page, the link to it, of course. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink and send those funds our way once a month, that allows us to, well, after we pooled it with money that we pull out of our own wallets, that allows us to fulfill our civic duty by paying our bills, flying under the radar, because that's what happens when you pay your bills, and then we continue this resistance against and I'm calling it out. It's a Nazi takeover of America, and we will not let it happen. And we have you to thank, your generosity, of course, to thank for allowing us to fulfill this civic duty that the founders originally intended, oh so many years ago. You can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms, and you know who they are. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Okay, I'm sorry I'm a bit discombobulated because of this pain that I'm in. It's very uncomfortable. I'll try to, as I said, soldier through. Oh, boy. Okay, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Reuters, and it is by staff at Reuters. A man who rammed a truck into an empty house in Massachusetts, then singled out two black people from a crowd of bystanders and shot them dead, was a white supremacist who had written that white people are apex predators, prosecutors said. Nathan Allen, age 28, stole a truck from a plumbing company, crashed it into a home in Winthrop, Massachusetts, then got out and killed bystanders David Green and Ramona Cooper, said Suffolk County District Attorney Rachel Rollins. Police who responded to the scene fired on Allen, who died in a hospital. Allen had troubling white supremacist rhetoric found in his own handwriting, and there was evidence of anti-Semitic and racist statements against black individuals, the DA said. This individual wrote about the superiority of the white race, about whites being apex predators, Rollins added. He walked by several other people that were not black. They are alive. They were not harmed. Police described the victims as a retired state trooper who served 36 years on the force. Described victim Green as a retired state trooper. And Cooper was identified as a 60-year-old Air Force veteran. Cooper died in hospital after being shot 3 times in the back. And Green was shot 4 times in the head and 3 times on the torso and was pronounced dead at the scene. In security camera footage obtained by ABC News, the stolen truck can be seen being driven out of frame, after which a loud noise is heard, described as the sound of it hitting the house. White supremacist propaganda in the United States, including racist, anti-Semitic, and anti-LGBTQ messages, nearly doubled last year to a record level, the Anti-Defamation League said. And the New York-based advocacy group's data showed 5,125 cases reported in 2020 compared to just 2,700 in 2019. Nashedam of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Included in the bipartisan infrastructure deal reached with President Joe Biden last week is a plan to eliminate the country's remaining lead pipes and service lines, which for decades has posed a risk for contaminated water in millions of homes and schools. Lead can enter drinking water when water utility pipes or other service lines that connect to homes corrode. It is considered harmful at any level, and children are particularly vulnerable because it can slow growth, cause anemia, and result in learning and behavior problems. Federal regulators over the years have banned the use of lead in plumbing systems, but some pipes and service lines that were built before the rules were enacted have yet to be replaced. The White House says lead pipes continue to serve an estimated 400,000 schools and child care centers and 6 million to 10 million homes. The EPA requires public water systems to conduct annual water quality tests and alert residents if lead contamination is found. If lead is detected, water utilities have to replace pipes within 15 years and provide filters to households during the process. But then there are the service lines that connect utilities pipes to homes and are often on private property. Checking for lead in those lines is generally the homeowner's responsibility, though some cities and states provide funding to help replace them. Residents can hire a certified plumber to test service lines. Some homes also have privately supplied water, such as from wells. In those cases, the CDC says residents should test water annually and contact local public health departments if lead is detected. Local health departments or nearby water utilities that use groundwater also keep information about local contaminants. States and cities have worked for years to replace pipes and service lines, but efforts have lagged in many places, in part because of the steep price tag. The EPA estimates that the average cost of replacing a lead service line ranges from $1,200 to $12,300 for a homeowner and has made grants available for local governments to disperse. Chicago, Denver, and New York, New Jersey are among the cities that have provided individual homeowners with full or partial aid in recent years to get rid of lead service lines. To lessen the risk posed by lead pipes, cities treat drinking water with additives that help prevent their corrosion. Experts say such measures have helped reduce overall lead exposure, but do not eliminate risk. Black and Hispanic Americans have long been at disproportionate risk of lead exposure in drinking water and lead-based paint, according to the CDC. Children who live in housing built before 1978 or in households with incomes at or below the federal poverty line are thought to face the greatest risk of exposure. The lead-tainted water crisis in Flint, Michigan disproportionately hurt black residents who make up a majority of the city. When the city switched its water source in 2014 to the Flint River, state regulators advised local officials not to treat the river water with anti-corrosion chemicals. That resulted in river water scraping lead off the city's aging pipes and plumbing fixtures. A report later issued by the Michigan Civil Rights Commission found systemic racism at the core of problems that caused the water crisis. Olga R. Rodriguez of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. California added 5 more states, including Florida, to the list of places where state-funded travel is banned because of laws that discriminate against members of the LGBTQ community, the state attorney general announced yesterday, Monday. Democratic Attorney General Rob Bonta added Florida, Arkansas, Montana, North Dakota, and West Virginia to the list that now has 17 states where state employees' travel is forbidden, except under limited circumstances. Lawmakers in 2016 banned non-essential travel to states with laws that discriminate against lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. The 12 other states on the list are Texas, Alabama, Idaho, Iowa, Oklahoma, South Dakota, South Carolina, Kentucky, North Carolina, Kansas, Mississippi, and Tennessee. The 5 states newly added to the list have introduced bills in their legislatures this year that prevent transgender women and girls from participating in school sports with their gender identity, and blocks access to health care and allows the discrimination of the LGBTQ community. Florida, Montana, Arkansas, and West Virginia passed laws that prevent transgender women and girls from participating in school sports consistent with their gender identity. North Dakota signed into law a bill allowing certain public-funded student organizations to restrict LGBTQ students from joining without losing funding. Arkansas passed the first law in the nation to prohibit physicians from providing gender-affirming health care to transgender minors regardless of the wishes of the parents, or whether a physician deems such care to be medically necessary. These laws would rather demonize trans youth than focus on solving real issues like tackling gun violence, beating back this pandemic, and rebuilding our economy, Bunta said. The state law has exemptions for some trips, such as travel needed to enforce California law and to honor contracts signed before the states were added to the list. Travel to conferences or out-of-state training are examples of trips that can be blocked. It is unclear what effect California's travel ban will have. Bunta did not have information about how many state agencies have stopped sending state employees to the states on the list, or the financial impact of California's travel ban on those states. Well, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Hi, and welcome to COVID Quickly, a Scientific American podcast series.
This is your fast-track update on the COVID pandemic. We bring you up to speed on the science behind the most urgent questions about the virus and the disease. We demystify the research and help you understand what it really means.
I'm Tanya Lewis.
I'm Josh Fishman.
And we're Scientific American's senior health editors. Today we're talking about the danger of the Delta variant.
And the patchwork vaccine effort around the world.
And lottery tickets or beers for a shot in the U.S. The latest virus variant to grab headlines is called Delta. Why are scientists particularly concerned about it, Josh?
Because it's more transmissible, and it seems to be putting more people in the hospital, Tanya. And it's on the rise all around the globe. Delta was first spotted in India and spread quickly to 74 countries. In England, it accounts for 90% of new cases, taking over from the version called Alpha. It's got a bunch of mutations that seem to help it get inside human cells and evade antibodies that hunt for it. Researchers at Public Health England found the chances of people passing Delta around their households were 64% higher than with Alpha. That's a big jump.
England had started opening up more recently, too. Couldn't that have also led to more infections, in addition to some feature of the variant itself?
Yeah, there's stuff going on that can heighten the Delta numbers. People started traveling and businesses and restaurants were opening. But the bottom line here is there's a steep climb in Delta cases. And Delta appears to send twice as many people to the hospital as Alpha does. That's severe illness, such as being unable to breathe. A lot of these people are younger, under age 30, according to research in the medical journal The Lancet. Now, this isn't all doom. Even with Delta, vaccines keep people safe. Health records in Scotland show 2 shots of the Pfizer vaccine blocked Delta infection in 80% of people. Both the Pfizer and AstraZeneca vaccines kept practically everyone who got those shots out of the hospital, early data from England show. So what's this all mean? Already in the US, Delta accounts for 10% of infections. So it's coming. With summer reopenings and people mingling, unvaccinated people could get Delta during the next few months, setting up an ugly fall. Getting vaccinated, the numbers show, is the best route to keeping infections down and getting life closer to normal. More than half of the adult U.S. population has been fully vaccinated now. What's the situation like in other countries?
So far, most of the vaccines have gone to the wealthiest countries. In many low-income countries, less than 1% of people have gotten a single dose. An international effort called COVAX was supposed to fill this gap. Its goal was to distribute 2 billion vaccine doses by the end of this year. But as freelance contributor Sarah Reardon reported for us earlier this week, COVAX is far behind where it needs to be. A big part of the problem is that wealthy countries bought up all the vaccine doses before many vaccines were even approved. COVAX says part of the delay was because it lacked enough funding early on to secure those doses. Even when vaccines are available, they may be perceived as less effective or less safe than the vaccines available in richer countries. For example, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, 1.7 million doses of AstraZeneca's vaccine sat idle while European drug regulators weighed the risk of blood clots. By the time the vaccines were cleared for use, they were about to expire, and many were shipped elsewhere. Even if COVAX reaches its goal, it would still only vaccinate 20% of every country's population. So many countries have been forced to negotiate their own deals with vaccine makers as well. There is some good news. Wealthy countries recently pledged a total of 870 million vaccines to COVAX, half of them by the end of this year. But that still leaves a long way to go.
Clearly, vaccination is a life-saving idea. But in the U.S., it's been tough persuading some people to get these shots. Now, states and businesses are using creative lures to get folks to roll up their sleeves, and you just wrote about some free stuff people can get. What kinds of rewards?
Well, several states, including Ohio, California, and New York, have created lotteries with prizes ranging up to $1 million or more for people who've gotten vaccinated. Some states are also offering vaccinated teenagers the chance to win scholarships to state colleges and universities. Other states are trying more unusual approaches. West Virginia is raffling off rifles and shotguns. Washington State is letting marijuana dispensaries give out free joints. And New Jersey and Connecticut have been giving away free beer. These offers may not last forever, so if you've just gotten vaccinated, check for updates. These kinds of incentives work, experts say. A survey of unvaccinated people found that offering a cash reward or saying they wouldn't need to wear masks anymore made people more likely to say they would get a shot. And if the end result means more vaccinated people, that's a good thing. Now you're up to speed. Thanks for joining us.
Come back in 2 weeks for the next episode of COVID Quickly, and check out SciAm.com for updated and in-depth COVID news.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Welcome to Defining Moments in MMWR History. I'm your host, Dr. Sonia Rasmussen, Editor-in-Chief of the MMWR. In early 2015, an outbreak of infections with Zika virus, a flavivirus transmitted by Aedes mosquitoes, was first recognized in northeastern Brazil. By September, a sharp increase in the number of babies born with microcephaly was reported in areas affected by the outbreak. The Brazil Ministry of Health established a task force to investigate the possible association between microcephaly and Zika virus infection during pregnancy. They also established a registry to capture microcephaly cases and pregnancy outcomes among women suspected to have had Zika virus infection during pregnancy. On January 22, 2016, MMWR first published a report on the possible association between Zika virus infection and microcephaly. This was the first of more than 60 MMWR reports on Zika virus, which have provided critical guidance and recommendations for public health practice worldwide. Today, I'm talking with Dr. Peggy Honane, co-lead for the Pregnancy and Birth Effects Task Force for CDC's Zika response. Dr. Honane is an epidemiologist and acting director of the Division of Congenital and Developmental Disorders at CDC. Thank you for joining me today, Peggy.
Thanks for having me, Sonia.
Remind us, what are the signs and symptoms of someone infected with Zika virus?
The most common symptoms of Zika are fever, rash, conjunctivitis, headache, joint pain, and muscle pain. Most people infected with Zika virus either have very mild symptoms or don't have any symptoms at all. Women who are infected with Zika virus during pregnancy have an increased risk of having a baby with certain birth defects, including microcephaly, regardless of whether they have symptoms of Zika.
What is microcephaly and why is it important?
Microcephaly is when a baby's head is smaller than expected compared to babies of the same age and sex. Babies with microcephaly often have smaller brains, and their brains might not have developed properly. Microcephaly is associated with many poor health outcomes, including feeding challenges, sleeping difficulties, motor impairment, vision and hearing abnormalities, and seizures. And many babies with microcephaly will have severe, lifelong health challenges.
Take us back to this time. What did you and other CDC experts do when you first heard about these babies with microcephaly in Brazil?
To address these reports of microcephaly coming from Brazil, CDC assembled experts in birth defects epidemiology, reproductive health, and the Zika virus. On January 15, 2016, CDC released a Health Alert Network advisory to warn pregnant women about the potential risks of travel to areas with Zika. And just a few days later, on January 19th, CDC released the first MMWR with interim clinical guidance for pregnant women with possible Zika virus infection. Just a few days after that, on January 22nd, CDC activated its Emergency Operations Center to coordinate the public health response to this outbreak. That same day, MMWR released the report we are discussing today.
What role did that report play in identifying Zika as a cause of birth defects?
That report really laid the groundwork for our surveillance and research efforts to identify the full impact of Zika virus infection during pregnancy. It sounded the alarm and really indicated to us that our work on Zika virus was just beginning.
What other types of studies have been done to better understand Zika as a cause of birth defects?
In early 2016, CDC rapidly established a surveillance network in collaboration with state, local, tribal, and territorial health departments to identify and monitor all pregnancies with laboratory evidence of possible Zika virus infection. CDC also collaborated with state and territorial health departments to implement rapid birth defect surveillance for microcephaly, brain abnormalities, and other serious birth defects that have been linked to Zika virus infection, regardless of the Zika virus testing results. These two surveillance systems each make unique contributions because not every pregnancy that's been exposed to Zika virus will be tested for Zika, and many pregnant women might not be tested during the brief time period when we can identify Zika virus infection.
What strategies have been recommended to prevent transmission of this virus?
Transmission of Zika virus can be prevented by preventing mosquito bites and sexual transmission of the virus. CDC continues to recommend that pregnant women avoid travel to any areas where there's risk of Zika because of the serious risk of birth defects. CDC also recommends that women and men who are planning to conceive in the near future consider waiting to conceive after traveling to areas with risk of Zika.
Tell us about the role that MMWR reports have played in this outbreak.
The MMWR has been critical to our efforts to rapidly disseminate new information as it's discovered. Little was known about Zika virus and particularly infection during pregnancy before the outbreak began. Through the MMWR, we have published reports about Zika virus in pregnant women and infants in the United States and released important clinical guidance for the evaluation and management of both pregnant women and infants with possible Zika virus infection. We continue to update this clinical guidance as we gather new information.
What are some of the lessons that have been learned from this outbreak and its response?
The Zika virus outbreak and emergency response highlighted the medical vulnerability of pregnant women and infants to emerging infections and other health threats, and reinforced the need to carefully monitor the health of these populations. It also demonstrated the importance of public health collaboration between different disciplines within the field, including maternal and child health, infectious disease, epidemiology, and vital statistics.
Dr. Honane, thank you for joining me today. MNWR is proud of its role in communicating critical findings of this investigation and response. For more information on this outbreak, or to learn more about the latest in public health, visit cdc.gov/MMWR. Until next time, this is Dr. Sonia Rasmussen for Defining Moments in MMWR History.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Why is critical race theory in the political crosshairs? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Critical race theory isn't new. It developed as an intellectual movement by legal scholars beginning in the 1970s, and since then has been embraced by other disciplines. Critical race theory, in broad brushstrokes, focuses on race as a social and historical reality, and racism not so much as individual acts of prejudice, but rather as part of our history and institutions, significantly aided and abetted and institutionalized by law. For example, the United States Constitution counted African American slaves as 3/5 of a person. After the Civil War, the Southern states enacted the Black Codes, intended to perpetuate slavery in a slightly different form. Critics claim that critical race theory is unpatriotic and anti-American, and that it's divisive because it highlights how people of different races have been treated differently throughout the country's history. In 2021, Arkansas, Idaho, Iowa, Oklahoma, Florida, and Texas have banned teaching critical race theory in their schools, and many other states as well are considering similar proposals. Eradicating the history of slavery and racism from our consciousness, our schools, and our history, as if whitewashing the past will somehow better enable young people to better and more realistically face the future? Now there's a really bad theory. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day SWAC leader Philip Murray beat back reports that the Little Steel strike had collapsed. Even as the steel companies were championing that the strike had been broken, Murray insisted that of the 90,000 workers involved, only 20,000 had returned to work in the mills that stretched across 7 states. He added they were mostly supervisors and foremen and not production workers. Murray leveled charges against Ohio Governor Martin Davey that the Ohio National Guard was being used as company police to smash the strike. Strike leaders added that the companies were staging dummy back-to-work parades. In fact, Labor Secretary Perkins had announced that it was the government's effort at mediation that had collapsed. But the steel magnates were on the offensive and had the backing of local politicians and police. George Mike, a Union man and disabled veteran, was the latest casualty in the anti-labor war. He was killed the day before at Maltrup Steel in Beaver Falls, Ohio, as picketers clashed with deputy sheriffs. In Indiana, police rushed to plant gates at Inland Steel to guard against new battles as 20,000 strikers prepared for the imminent forced reopenings of Inland Steel and Youngstown Sheet and Tube there. Both mills remained closed for weeks. In Warren, Ohio, police issued a warrant for CIO strike leader Gus Hall and 2 other strike leaders on charges that he was the brains behind a terrorist plot to blow up strike-bound steel mills. And at Bethlehem's Cambria Works in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, 2 separate dynamitings destroyed main water supplies, causing an immediate end to an attempted back-to-work movement there. The strike was far from over. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin, weather from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where we continue to be under an excessive heat warning. It is an active warning, and the temperature currently right outside the door here at the mothership in Rogue River, Oregon proper, is now at 65 degrees. Expecting to be cooler than yesterday. We were at 114. We were at 106 for a bit of time, and then it shot up to 114. Expecting only a high of 100 degrees today. Isn't that nice? Well, it will be record high temperatures are expected anyway. Winds out of the west at 10 to 15 miles per hour. They were so stiff yesterday. The gusts actually blew over quite a few things, and I expect the same type of wind damage today, unfortunately. Clear skies overnight with lows in the mid-60s, which is good. Winds will continue out of the west at 10 to 15 miles per hour, and mainly sunny skies tomorrow with highs around 100. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon have been updated from the weekend, and now infections stand at 116,014 people. And the deceased, which increased yesterday by 1, still stands at 147. Apparently, all lockdown measures and use of masks will not be required after tomorrow, even though we continue to have 30-40 cases a day of infections in our county alone. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm following the World Health Organization's little protocols, and I'm wearing a mask inside because of the Delta variant, indeed. Grass pollen is high right outside the window here in Rogue River. The air quality index is moderate at 55 parts per million, and that's unhealthy for those who have breathing problems. And that daytime UV index remains very high at 9. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 29.81 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 66%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 61 and cloudy. Paris is 67 and cloudy. Rome is 88 degrees and sunny. Kyiv is 68 with thunderstorms. Kabul is 84 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 81 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 68 degrees with heavy rain. Sydney, Australia is 57 with its own heavy rain. San Francisco, California is 55 degrees and mostly cloudy. And New York is 88 degrees Fahrenheit, sunny, and they are under an active heat warning in their own right. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Tom Wilson of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A growing number of cryptid crypto asset firms are abandoning attempts to register with Britain's financial regulator as global scrutiny of the rapidly growing sector intensifies. The Financial Conduct Authority, otherwise known as FCA, banned Binance, one of the world's biggest crypto exchanges, on Friday from conducting any regulated activity in Britain as regulators across the world bolster oversight of the crypto sector. Data on registrations shows the number which have been ditched has jumped by a quarter in less than a month. An FCA spokesman said on yesterday, that adding Binance withdrew its application in mid-May without giving further details. Crypto-related firms have since January had to register with the FCA, which oversees compliance with laws designed to prevent money laundering and terrorist financing before doing business. Just 6 firms have registered, with dozens more still being assessed but not yet deemed fit and proper. Around 64 have withdrawn their applications, the spokesman said, up from 51 in early June. A Binance spokesperson declined to comment, but said it worked closely with regulators and law enforcement to further the security and sustainability in the industry while providing the best services and protection to our users. Regulatory concerns about cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin include their potential for use in money laundering and other illegal activities, as well as potential risks to consumers. Binance, run by Canadian Changpeng Zhao, is one of the most significant players in the crypto world. It offers services ranging from digital token trading to derivatives, as well as emerging technologies such as tokenized versions of stocks. Yet its regulatory structure is opaque. Its spokesperson declined to comment on where its holding company is based, describing Binance as decentralized. Binance has been targeted by regulators across the world in recent months. Japan's regulator said that Binance was operating in the country illegally, a notice posted on Japan's Financial Services Agency website showed. The FCA is aligning with other major regulators, notably in the U.S. and Asia. Bitcoin, which has fallen about 18% in the last 13 days as China tightens curbs on the cryptocurrency sector, shrugged off the FCA move and was up 0.3% at $34,767.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
This final amuse-bouche is brought to us by staff at Reuters. Greece has recovered works of art by Pablo, Picasso, and Piet Mondrian, stolen from its National Gallery in 2012, authorities said. Thieves broke into the gallery and snatched Picasso's 1939 painting Woman's Head, donated by the Spanish artist in 1949, and Dutch painter Mondrian's Mill, dated 1905. To mislead the guard, the thieves had activated the gallery's alarm system several times before breaking into the building early in the morning. The guard turned off the alarm only to spot one of the thieves through the motion detector. On yesterday, authorities arrested a 49-year-old Greek man who confessed that he had stolen the paintings and led police to a forest outside Athens where he had hidden them, the Citizens Protection Ministry said. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we'll meet up tomorrow, indeed, for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. De novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.